Hi there.
Hey, how you doing, Eridian?
Hi, yeah, good to have you on, Stephy. It's great to have you here. So welcome to the community staking podcast that I'm hosting today. And today my hat is the Lido community lifeguard that I'm wearing. So here to talk to you about all things community staking and then ask you some questions about Lido and just get your thoughts on that, just so we can have a broader conversation about the topic of staking providers and have some more balanced opinions. So that's the plan for today. You ready?
I'm all good. Ask away. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's go for it then. So, first question I'm asking people is, when did you get into crypto?
Um, so I got into crypto around 2019, kind of through the back door. I was a technical writer, and I would write about kind of any kind of technology, superconductors, and also blockchains, but within like the private realm. So I knew how a blockchain functioned, and then I started off on my own as like a freelance technical writer after leaving my last company, and I just kind of by accident started writing docs and white papers for different projects in the space, and then learned about Ethereum, learned about public blockchains and what's going on, and then never looked back.
Yeah.
So that was in 2019, and then I would say officially got into crypto in 2020, 2021, joining some of these projects, and then working at Messari starting in 2021 as an analyst, where I cover all kinds of chain infrastructure.
Okay, great. So, sounds like we've spoken to a range of people so far, people that are like very OG or people that are fairly new, and it has been a real mix, which is great to see that not everyone is a month old in crypto or 10 years old, bought their first Bitcoin with
Somewhere in
the
the
pizza
middle.
for a pizza, that kind of thing. So um, yeah. So the question there is, it sounds like, would you put yourself as more technical or non-technical, or where do you feel that you sit on that spectrum?
I would say I'm more so lean to the technical side. I'm not a developer, although somehow, and again, I'm not exactly sure how this happened, but I spent a lot of time learning and researching about technology in my previous role, just being a technical writer about anything. And so I feel that I can, if I take enough time, I can learn about any kind of complex technology. But now, in my role at Messari, having to think about all sides of things, I've become a lot more like versed in like the economic side of things. So I would say I'm somewhere in the middle, but lean towards more technical, and that's what I find the most fascinating is just understanding how all these protocols work.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think the technical side, trying to break down, particularly as a community staking
Mhm.
podcast, is to break down the opinion that everyone has to be super technical to be involved in staking in any capacity. So it's great to hear that. So okay, let's talk about staking then. Now we know your
Sure.
background. So do you stake or are you involved with staking on Ethereum?
Yeah, so I am involved with staking. We obviously work together with the EtherFi solo staking program. I always wanted to stake myself because one of the first projects that I was writing these docs for was a non-custodial ETH2 staking service, like back before the merge. And then also I learned very soon, very early about DBT. So the solo staking program obviously is a program where people who are at home and might not have the 32 ETH to stake by themselves can get together in a DBT cluster and stake as a group, and we were responsible for the ETH that comes from the EtherFi protocol. So I've been staking now. I think I was in the first cohort. I guess it's been what, like 6 months now since we got started.
Since you got started, yeah.
And yeah, about 6 months. I was so happy to be selected because I didn't think I was technical enough to be included. So thank you for believing in me that I could figure it out. And I think it really is. It has been such an easy experience using a DApp node, and obviously working with you, Eridian, who's just been like the best at coordinating all of us to get together these DBT clusters. It's been a super easy experience. It's my validators just like sitting there behind my desk. I don't even really have to think about it almost ever at all.
Yeah. No, that's great. A great summary. We can talk in a bit more detail for people that don't know about ETHFi. So ETHFi is a fairly new
Mhm.
staking protocol, staking provider, and they're trying a lot of different things. And one of the things that they're really keen on is solo staking and staking from home, decentralization, which is what we're all here for. So their idea was to come up with this program called Operation Solo Staker, and that was to provide the ETH to people that wanted to stake from home. And it was pioneering this idea of like a rent a machine. So someone buys a machine but pays in installments, say $30 a month, and they earn roughly $30 a month and a little bit more for their time and effort and energy to validate and be part of Ethereum. So that was the core concept. And as you said, that's been running for about 6 months now. And you and I and two other people were involved in the first mainnet cluster of solo stakers with a DVT cluster on mainnet, and that proposed its first block a few weeks ago. So it is all happening. It's not just theory anymore.
Totally. Yeah, it's super exciting. I think it happened pretty quickly after we changed from testnet to mainnet. So that was like a nice thrill to kind of get intro to that.
So yeah, we can talk a little bit more about that then, as you talked about DAppNode and setups and things, just to give people an idea of what it was like for someone that hadn't staked before to go from not staking to being involved in a program like ETH5's Operation Solo Staker. And then we'll talk more about, well, what would that look like in future to expand to other programs, and your thoughts on the pros and cons of this structure. So yeah, you mentioned DAppNode. So for those of you that don't know, DAppNode is a hardware and software provider for Ethereum staking. So they have this open source software that you can install on pretty much any machine, and it will give you a pretty UI, pretty interface where you can install the different clients you need to stake and do it all point and click, even on your phone. So that's what DAppNode is. They also do hardware, which is why you can buy just a fully ready to go machine, and that's what you received. So how was it from the moment you got it to staking? What was your experience like with that?
Yeah, so it was one of the first things I did when I moved into my new apartment. I think I got the machine and very quickly I knew I had to get that going to start participating. And so the first thing I had to do was to get an internet plan. And I think I got like a 1 GB internet plan, which wasn't actually too expensive, thankfully. So I did that, got it all set up, and really like all I had to do was reference the docs that Eridian made that are in the EtherFi like doc page, and it was super simple. Like plug it in, attach it to the internet. I can't remember all of the steps now, but it was just like truthfully, like I thought it was going to be much harder to do so. After spending a lot of time like understanding how one would stake from home using like a machine, like building their own machine, like I just figured that it wouldn't be so simple, even though like the point of the DAppNode is to make it simpler. Like I just thought there'd be more steps, but there really wasn't. Installed a couple packages, again, just like straight from the docs. And then we were up and running on testnet. I wish I could give you more details because I want to try to like, get people understanding what we did. But truthfully, like, that was about 6 months ago now, and my memory is just like kind of gone, but it was just easy. And that's all I can remember. And that's all I can say.
Well, that's it. I mean, rough time estimate. We're talking hours, days to set it up.
I think I did all that in under an hour, like getting the testnet set up, certainly under an hour.
Yeah, no, that's great. And the testament to the fact that you haven't had to think about it or do anything for the last 6 months is because once you turned it on, you didn't need to, it just worked.
Yeah, and I think also like the best part, like also like so it's running, at home. But we have WireGuard, so we have a way to be able to like tunnel into our like home computer in case there is an issue. And there's also like you get Telegram, like a Telegram bot that lets you know if there's something wrong. So if you did need to pay attention to your validator, you could, be alerted right away. And then you could look on like even if you're traveling or something, you just go on your computer, like tunnel in and then like fix the problem. So that's also like helps me, even though there hasn't been a problem, like there's been nothing that's been needed to happen, like, knock on wood. It continues to be that way. Like it's just really nice to know that like you don't actually need to physically be by your validator. Under most cases, like, worst case scenario, maybe there's like your your power goes down and it doesn't go back on or something. You'd have to maybe call someone to go and turn on the power in your house. But other than that, like in terms of software, it's all been like really, really smooth.
Well, let's talk about that then. So this is something that people, the many factors that are involved in solo staking that people worry about. So having the ETH is the biggest one. It tends to be. But even if you had the ETH, the technical aspects, as you said, setting a machine, but you've referenced some points there that aren't solved necessarily by DAppNode, but the simplicity of using a DAppNode is what if the power goes off, or what if something happens, or what if the machine breaks? Like those are all common, no matter how you set it up. So what can we do to fix that now with DVT? The solution that we're using, there's a few benefits to that. One is the security aspect of not having to give somebody an entire key. The key for a single validator is split between the four of us, so no one of us can do anything bad. We can't get slashed or do anything ourselves. But it also means that only 3 of us in our cluster need to be online. So if you do have an issue with power or the machine goes offline, you don't have to wake up in the morning and be terrified that something's gone wrong for the last 6 hours and you've stopped the testing. Now, I've also written lots of documentation on the ETH stake and knowledge base to explain that that's still fine, even if something did go offline. and the whole cluster was down for a bit. That's completely okay. And Ethereum is resilient and not hugely penalizing, so it's designed to allow for that. But try and tell people not to worry, and it doesn't really work. If you're getting constant pings on your phone being like missed attestation, like that doesn't make you feel good. Even if someone says don't worry, you still worry. So with DVT, you don't have that. We have situations where people have been offline and the attestations have been missed or by a single person, but the validator itself is still attesting and still able to propose blocks when it needs to. So that's the benefit of using DVT, not just from a distributed validator perspective of the security and the geographic diversity, but it also does help you sleep at night.
Totally. I feel like, yeah, DBT, there's just so many good things about it. I feel like you touched on most all of the points, but having seen it like being built like since back in, I guess, like 2020, 2019, it's just amazing to see how far it's come just from an idea to help make, Ethereum staking more resilient to like being like having teams, like having protocols like live on mainnet already. So, with our validators, like in the cluster that we're running, we're using OBAL, or OBAL. I'm not saying it right. I'm sorry, OBAL team. But we're using OBAL, which is not like it's basically like an additional like package you can install on your DApp node that allows for a validator key to be split into the four of us. And so, as Eridian was saying, you only need like a certain threshold of people or of machines to be online in order for the validator to operate correctly. So in our cluster of 4, it's the threshold we have is 3 out of 4. If you have a bigger cluster, let's say 10, it could be like 7 out of 10. And that way you just like have like redundancy. So if like you said, if my machine goes down, you guys, keep the validator going and it's all fine until I come back. So even though I feel good that I can like check, like I'll get my notifications and I can like tunnel in and like make any kind of changes I need to if my machine is to go down or if there is a problem, like we have a backup, like we're all working together. So that's, I think, super powerful about DVT. And the more people or the more clusters use it, like not only are you protecting, yourself and your ETH, but also like the larger like beacon chain, right? Because if like slashing penalties are worse, like the more people participate in the same event. So if it's like one validator and you did something wrong, it's like, okay, you might be slashed a little bit. If it's like thousands of validators, like it's going to be far worse, right? So like at the end of the day, like we all know about client diversity being really important, and unfortunately, a lot of people are running like Geth as the as their execution client, and we need to like improve that, right? And so let's say something happened with Geth, and then like I don't even know how many validators are using it, like fall together. If rather you're running a DBT cluster with other validators that are using different execution clients, different consensus clients, you might go down, but your validator keeps going. So it kind of protects, it's like an additional level of like security or additional level of like protection when everybody works together. So some people can use the majority client and some people don't. And it's just like stronger that way than if everybody was separated. So truthfully, there's just like so many good things about DVT. I could just keep rambling on, but I'll let you pick up from here.
Well, the one extra point I will add to that is while you can have quite a diverse clients, we can each be running individual clients below. It does add a layer of single point of failure because we are all using the same OBOL client. It's called
That's true.
So everything's going through the single client. So if there was an issue or a bug with that creates a different single point of failure. So other things to consider. There's never a perfect like silver bullet solution. So it's just something to consider with DVT as well. Okay.
I would just like add into that. That's a really great point. And it's great that there are different protocols. There's a number of them that are also working on solutions. So just the more diversity and the more like innovation we have at the DVT level, the better.
Yes, completely agree. And the analogy would be with, say, Ethereum. So when Ethereum was first launched, there was not client diversity. There was a client, and then the beacon chain existed, and there was some clients, and now there's more, and they get more robust over time. So it's more like a journey from single client to multi-client architecture, and you tend to have to prove that it works first before more people jump on. The early adopters, there's not always as many as you need, and then as it becomes a more mature product and people can see the benefits of having their own DVT clients or something like that to create diversity, then yes, they will be more inclined to do that. So okay, I think we've covered so much about DVT, which is great, particularly from the why aspect. In previous conversations, I've talked a lot more about the technical side, like very specifically about the key splitting and how all that works. So it was great to hear your thoughts on the social side as well.
Totally.
Okay, so we talked about your past experiences, what you're currently doing now with your staking journey, and I'd like to move on to talk about Lido a little bit. So that's what one of the reasons we're here today to discuss, not to talk in defense of Lido or talk about just how amazing it is. It's actually just to have an open conversation with the community about Lido. A lot of this can get lost. The nuance gets lost, particularly on Twitter, where it's easy to have a screaming match about why it's bad, but it's very hard to counter any of those points with why it exists or why it maybe isn't as bad as they think. And the nuance that I put in the blog post that I wrote recently is Lido good for Ethereum. I was discussing, like, it's easy to have good versus evil. Everyone likes nice, clear, defined lines. Good versus evil, David versus Goliath, TradFi versus DeFi. It's very nice. It's nice to have an enemy to fight against, and it's good when it's a big faceless evil organization or DAO like Lido, where they're all out to get Ethereum and they just want it to be destroyed, apparently, right? But reality is never that simple, and it's not like that. So part of this podcast and the content I'm creating is just to give people the opportunity to talk about it in a slightly more open setting where we can actually have these deeper conversations rather than just the back and forth on Twitter where things can get taken out of context or nuances lost. So please feel free to say exactly your thoughts, and don't hold back if you do want to speak your mind. It's a completely open environment, and yeah, let's go for it. So we'll just start with saying, like, what's your thoughts on Lido from a member of the Ethereum community? Like, just coming in from the outside, what do you think about Lido, and how do you think it's viewed?
So, you are correct that right now, like, the sentiment towards Lido is like pretty negative, especially on Twitter. And I think, but the truth is, I feel like there's like pros and cons to Lido. And then, like you've said before, like, Lido exists and it has, helped people participate in staking that otherwise wouldn't have been able to. And it is a step up from, staking with a centralized exchange or something that's completely centralized. So there are centralized choke points to Lido, absolutely. But I think, like, the good is that the operators, so right now there's, I think, 29 node operators. They are non-correlated from each other technically. So if these numbers are probably a little bit off, but I believe that each node operator takes around like under 5% of Lido's entire share each. And that's like something around like 2% of the total ETH or ETH stake supply each. And those validators are operated, and they're not connected to each other from the operational standpoint. So that's like the plus in my mind. Also, the fact that in the future there's work being done to enable permissionless node operations so that other people who aren't these permissioned well-known staking entities can also participate. So I think those are pluses. On the other hand, and I think this is what most people are have a point of contention about, is just how much power is held by a small group of people within the DAO. I'm not super familiar. I just want to be like fully clear. I don't know the full details of it, so I don't want to like start to point fingers and point anyone in the wrong direction. But my understanding is that there's like certain individuals who have a large number of tokens, and then therefore like a large number of like a large degree of influence over the protocols, like smart contracts, and those smart contracts determine where the ETH is routed, if the protocol is on or off, a bunch of other things external to the actual node operation. So clearly, that's any protocol that has too much power in the hand of a few can be problematic. But it's also, like, as we've seen with like almost every protocol ever, like, it's so hard. Like, DAO governance is like difficult, and like that's like an unsolved problem just generally. And I think that everybody's just trying to figure it out. And like, we see this everywhere. And I'm not saying that as an excuse that it is okay that it is in this state, because no, like, steps need to be taken by the community, by the people who have the power to disseminate that power, in order to, give to actually like fulfill the promise of solo staking on Ethereum, or like making sure that the beacon chain is resilient against anybody having too much control. So that's kind of self-limiting factor.
Yeah.
But
I think that's
at the same time,
yeah,
I wouldn't say, I just don't think it's fair to say that it's all bad. But I do think that attention needs to be made to make it as more fair as possible.
Absolutely. I think that's yeah, a great way to summarize it. A lot of it is around time. So the Lido is on a journey. It is not in a fixed state today. It's different from the way it started, and it will be different in a few years' time. Some of the better points that I've seen raised are more about the direction. People are like, okay, if Lido wants to get there, then like, how does it get
Let's
there?
do
What does
it.
that direction look like? And we're going to talk a bit more about that. Like, what does the future look like? And self-awareness is something that's been commented on. It's like Lido has no idea about this. Like, they just sit there in their ivory tower, just like with a money printer, and it's like, well, it's not actually like that. They're incredibly aware of it. I don't actually work for Lido. I just sit as this fly on the wall, as this contributor, as a community staker. And the conversation they had, they are hugely aware. It doesn't make them feel good that they have the community just hating on them. And then the community would say like, well, then they shouldn't be evil. It's like, okay, but that's not like, it's not as clear cut as that. So let's talk about the journey we were just saying. So right now, Lido is a permissioned operator set of 31 operators, with 7 being onboarded currently. So that'll be 38 in total. That's still 38 operators. Now, other protocols have thousands of operators, potentially like Rocket Pool, permissionless operators, thousands. Now, one of the reasons that Lido does exist in its current form is that it's filling a very specific niche within Ethereum. If there was lots of identical protocols, then maybe they would have taken some of that volume away from them, but there was no direct Lido competitor. And one of the issues is scale. So if you have someone dropping or coming to stake $100 million worth of ETH or $1 billion worth of ETH in one go, the only options they really have, other than staking it themselves, are to stake with a centralized exchange or a centralized custodian or a registered company, or with Lido, because no other protocol is able to absorb that amount of ETH due to bonding requirements of permissionless protocols. Now, that doesn't necessarily make it a pro or con. That's just a statement about what Lido is and how it works. The fact that they're permissioned operators means they can be unbonded. They can absorb any amount of ETH very, very quickly and scale. Now, some people look at that and be like, they just want to scale. They just want to get as big as possible. But it's more a side effect of what their role in the ecosystem, rather than a goal in and of itself. Like, just because they have created a system where they can scale very quickly doesn't necessarily mean, therefore, the goal is to become 100% of Ethereum staking. Now, I don't speak for Lido. I just speak for the role that I'm trying to play in the Lido community, and that is to not increase Lido stake. I don't want to see Lido as a percentage of Ethereum get bigger. We all know why. It shouldn't go beyond 33%, or it should be even less than that. But it is where it is today. And people's arguments like, well, Lido should vote to self-limit, and they did have the vote and they chose not to. But the argument with that is, well, what would have happened if they had voted to self-limit? Because where would they have just closed the doors? Would they have raised the fees potentially? But the point I just raised is, well, where does the stake go to? If Lido closes the doors and someone comes in with $1 billion worth of ETH to stake, where do they go? Well, they go to a centralized exchange because no other protocol can absorb it. So is that better for Ethereum? Well, Lido's not above it. So it is, Lido is not gone above the limit. So that's better, right? If a centralized entity, so it's more nuanced than that. It depends what you believe Ethereum should be today, and also where you believe it should go to in the future. Okay, so that's like just a brief summary of like the situation with Lido as it is, and why it is what it is. So yeah, so sentiment isn't necessarily great at the moment, and part of that is because of this the LDO control. Now, as you said, you don't have a complete view on that, and neither do I. My goal is to actually be on this journey with the people watching this, and actually the content creation is me learning as we go along as well. So I would like to know more about the Lido DAO and LDO tokens, who holds the power. You get an issue with governing by, as you said, like DAO governance. So if everyone was given one token and everyone equally voted, you'd have this direct democracy, which is very hard to do that on day-to-day decisions. So decisions have to be delegated to individual subgroups. But at some point, you need to have a trade-off between actually doing things and making things happen versus complete paralysis of decision, because either nobody votes, you get apathetic voting, where if everyone had, if the DAO was, the token distribution was incredibly equitable right now, no one would vote, because as we see, nobody votes on things. and therefore no proposals will get passed. So what do you do then? So it's not that there's a perfect solution that everyone's like, well, why aren't you just doing this? It's very easy to just say, well, Lido must be evil because of this situation it's in, without actually offering a better solution.
I think yeah, like I agree with all the points you just made. I think that like one potential solution is maybe more communication. I think that like more communication, like outside of forums or just, I don't know, maybe on Twitter or like a blog post where other people can reference that talks about like the actions and the steps that like why did we choose not to like self-limit is like one thing, and like why does that make sense, and like instead of people speculating as to like, oh, it's only for profit or whatnot, and perhaps there is a reason behind it, perhaps there isn't, but like if there is a reason that would make people feel more calm or that like makes logical sense, like it just, you got to communicate that. And so again, I'm really not like, I wish that I was following along with this more. I don't want to say something that's untrue, so I please like just caveat anything I say right now to the audience, like the audience. Like I'm not 100% sure of the history of what's happened, but I do feel that, you know, if the actors involved want to like clear the air, it just makes sense to come forward and like have an open discussion with people in the community. Obviously, so you know how it is on Twitter. If you're getting attacked and you're told you're being terrible and this and that, it's easy sometimes not to respond, because it's just like, well, you know, like we got to come to the table at some kind of like even ground, right? Like it's like I'm probably not going to answer somebody who tells me I'm awful and disgusting and this and that. It's more so if like, hey, like I'm concerned about this, like how can we talk about it? So I think education and discourse is super important. So clearly what you're doing is a, you know, a step in that direction as somebody that helps Lido in that respect. But I think it also needs to come from the top, you know, if that's something that's of concern. And again, I'm not sure if these steps have already been taken, so I do apologize. But
No, they haven't.
Something that I would consider.
Absolutely, and I completely agree, which is literally why we're having this conversation. It's why I'm here right now doing this. So I got involved with Lido just because I was doing the DBT. I was doing some DBT trials, and they wanted to speak to somebody who was doing solo staking and interested in DBT. So I just sat in on some internal calls just to listen in and understand what they're doing. And I was shocked about how pro Ethereum and passionate they were about defending the ideals that we all believe in. So, and by that I mean that if I took a snapshot of some of those internal calls and posted them without saying it was Lido, nobody would believe that it was Lido speaking, because it's so pro Ethereum and they're so passionate about actually defending decentralization, to the point where some of these internal calls, they're like, yeah, if we don't like, they're fighting for like certain protocol upgrades in Ethereum, because they're like, well, we need this, because if we don't have this, we won't be able to have, we're going to start with, we'll talk about this in a second, but start with like a small amount of permissioned operators, like 1%. But if we want that 1% to become 20, 30, 40, 50% of the protocol permissionless operators, and we want that soon, we want that as fast as possible, then we need this particular upgrade. Like that's what they're fighting for in these meetings, not how do we pull up the drawbridge and stop anyone else joining. And there's loads of examples of that, but you're right, there's no communication on it, or it's very hard to communicate. Even I'm struggling with this now. Like I've posted a few things and the hate is strong, which is completely expected, but it's hard. I don't feel like I can reply to those comments on Twitter, because it'll be me. Imagine if it was real life, it would be me stood in front of an angry mob, thousands of people with their pitchforks and torches just looking for someone to get, and I would become the main character. I would stand there as the person. It's very easy to attack on Twitter, so that's why I don't want to engage in that like a negative back and forth. All I can do is post information and have, as you said, discourse like this that's a bit more nuanced, and build that rapport with the community, and to build the community itself, which is something that this is the start of. It's to I've said you can't have a community if there's no reason for people to join and nothing for them to do. You can have a community where it's just cross your fingers for an airdrop, and everyone's like, yeah, maybe airdrop, and I'll just be in the chat every day. Like, but that's not community.
Yeah.
So this is the first steps towards that. So yeah, completely agree, communication. And it's not easy, because if you are sat inside, feel like you're under siege, under attack by the community, who's going to be the first one to stick their head up?
Well, it's got to be done. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes we do things we don't want to do, and like sometimes we do things that are uncomfortable.
Yes.
So I think like what you're doing is obviously super helpful, and like that's like opening up the discussion as like as a neutral party. Like obviously Eridian, like everybody knows you for the fact that you're just like defending, you know, Ethereum staking and at-home staking and trying to make the beacon chain more decentralized and resilient. So like definitely a step in the right direction, like having you like help out with these initiatives. But yeah, like you said, it can't all fall on you. And communication needs to come from the top as well.
Absolutely. So the plan for this, I mean, this podcast series, one of some of the feedback I've had, which I didn't realize, is actually it's helpful for the people inside of Lido to watch this. People have been the team have been watching these and actually having some, not necessarily pro or super positive, but just like having people discussing Lido in a way that isn't just like, God, I hate them more, and they're like, no, I hate them more, and it's like, well, that's not really discussion. That's just people hating. So even just having this conversation has started that, and therefore in future I would like to have on as guests people from Lido, as you said, like higher ups, people that are in those positions of power, to have them be able to say their part in a forum where they won't get completely destroyed just for speaking and showing how they are. So that is the plan. It takes like some steps to get there, which is what I'm working on. But yeah, that I'm glad you see that as beneficial, because it's not as easy as it looks on the
Totally.
outside. Okay, so that was great. Let's for the final bit then, let's talk about what the future actually looks like for Lido. So we've discussed a lot of the issues and people's thoughts on it. So how do we go from 31, 38 permissioned operators to thousands of solo home stakers running Lido validators at home?
Again, I wish I was more caught up on this topic. I just know that it's something that's going to happen. But I think that like if I recall correctly from the announcement post a number of months ago, like well there needs to be a way to like guarantee that the permissionless node operators are, not going to cause a detrimental effect to the protocol or to like the larger Ethereum staking community. So, there's different ways that you can do that. You can have like bonding mechanisms, where they'll be slashed, like if they do something incorrectly, not only like so that it's their a portion of their stake is also, or they can stake as well, and a portion of that is also at risk. And I think also just the use of DVT, if I understand correctly, Lido was experimenting with both like OBOL and SSV for how they can like create a network of which people can join and like have that additional resilience when they work together. That's also really important. But I'm so sorry. I would love to hear from you. Like, I'm not sure like what the state of any of this is. Like, has there been a decision in regards to what actually is going to happen, or is this still all kind of like up in the air?
It's all up in the air. That's what we're talking
Gotcha.
about today. So this isn't a test or like a quiz on your Lido knowledge at all. It's actually for us to discuss, like, for us to talk about it, for me to say some things about what they're doing and to hear your thoughts on it, and to understand just what you think, to get a range of opinions on it. So Lido right now, it's been doing DVT trials, and this is the thing, like Lido does such amazing things for the wider community that are just invisible and just no one sees them. So they're participating in DVT trials. They are the biggest and active player participating in the testing Lido and OBOL SSV and OBOL DVT protocols. So they're doing some very big tests like that, and they'll be doing a simple DVT test. They're proposing it soon on mainnet as well. And that will involve some solo home stakers as well as some permissioned operators. So they're pushing ahead with that, and they're helping to big proponents of things like DAppNode and looking to support them to develop even more user-friendly software, not just so that Lido can use it. It would be fully open source, as everything is, and therefore other people could use it. So they do all these like beneficial things in the staking ecosystem. They're even sponsoring the staking gathering that ETHStaker are holding at DevConnect. So there's all these things that they are contributing to the space for, which maybe they don't get any recognition, but they with that the DVT trial, that's the first step. So sorry, so the first step is this DVT simple DVT trial that's coming over the next few months, hopefully. The plan that they had this V2 module. So Lido V2 modules was the big upgrade to the protocol, which happened and yet hasn't been fully utilized yet. So with that, what we have is, if you think of the first set of operators as the first module, and that's the permission set. Now, if you want to add another module, maybe it's a DVT module. And a way to look at this is maybe like vaults or pools. So you have the main Lido funnel, all the everyone that stakes ETH or puts money into the Lido contract goes into this funnel. Right now, it's all going to one module, the permission module, and that, as we said before, can take this infinite amount of ETH. It can just suck it all up really easily. Now, that's not the end goal. So what they want to do is create another module, which will be another funnel, another path for the funds to flow to. and that would be either a solo staking module similar to something like Rocket Pool, where it'd be a bond, and then people would come with their bond and stake, and then some of the flow would go to there. Now, it wouldn't be 100% of the flow straight away. Maybe they'd cap it at like a few percent or something, a small percentage of the total. And as it grows or shows that it can be sustained and efficient, then it can grow that way. So that's what I mean by modules. Then you would have other modules, potentially a DVT modules and different things. Now, the modules themselves, to build a module, anyone can build a module right now for Lido, but the only way to get it attached to the funnel, the ETH funnel that comes in, and get it to be part of the staked ETH minting, is to be approved by the Lido DAO. So it has to be voted on and be accepted. So anyone can do it. So that's permissioned in terms of who can create a module, which is a good thing, because if it was permissionless and anyone could just stick their hose pipe to the money funnel, then that might not be a good thing for the Lido protocol and for Ethereum in general. But the idea is that you can have a permissionless module. You can propose a permissionless module. So the solo staking one would be that. It would be a module where you could say, in this module, anyone can join. Here are the rules. Here are the requirements. Here's how we're going to maintain it to be secure and stable in the best interest of Ethereum. And the Lido DAO would be like, great, that's in the best interest of Ethereum. That's in the best interest of Lido. So let's approve it. And it becomes a module and gets attached to the ETH funnel. So that's how modules work. And that's what it's going to look like. Now, that exists today. The people that are building most heavily that module is Lido contributors themselves are building that first module, that solo staking module they're working on. The DVT protocols and Lido contributors are also working on modules as well, DVT modules, as well as other people. So there's a huge scope for modules in future. It may not be in the hundreds or thousands. It will be more in the tens, because they're quite difficult to make at the moment and they have to be voted on and things like that. But just to give you an idea of the scope and the scale of what's being developed and the timelines on that. So the timelines for those modules being live and in production are more in the like 6 to 12 months in the future timeframe. But there is this simple DVT module, which is kind of going to be attached to the first one. And as I said, it will be not necessarily like KYC, but it will be permissioned. It will be a bit like a test, a testing structure where there'll be some permissioned operators and some DVT participants, solo stakers, people from home, and that will be their first step towards that. So it is a journey, and that is the direction they're going in to get the operator set to be decentralized. And that's the part that I'm playing, is to help educate on that and to make sure that people understand that, like, in future, the goal is for Lido at some point in the future to have a very large permissionless operator set. And something to consider as well is that, like, there's like the entry and exit queue, which does create some issues with this, but you can rebalance operators. So if there's operators right now that come in, Lido's got some operators with like 8,000 operators, validators. If stake comes in, then it goes to the operator with the lowest number of validators. So actually, as a large operator, you don't want more operators. You actually want to just stay as the number as small as possible. And yet Lido is pushing, because it's in the interest of Lido and Ethereum, to have more operators and increase decentralization. So you could even get to the point in the future where it's rebalanced. So even though those large operators absorb a huge amount of the ETH, if a big inflow comes in, it could then be redistributed over time to the smaller operators as and when they come online. So that's the whole timing thing. It's like right now it looks quite centralized because or not very distributed, but over time that flow can push down to those DVT modules, the solo staking modules, when they're able to accept it and absorb it. And that is the goal and the plan.
Thank you. That's super helpful. You've caught me up and done my research for me, so I appreciate that. Yeah, I think like the only thing that really I think that all makes a lot of sense, and it'll be really interesting to see like once these protocols like come online, and that's going to be great, and to help decentralize and like just like enable more people to participate in the operation of Lido staking. I think then like the only thing that really comes to mind is that it all goes back to that discussion of the DAO, right? Like, yes. How do we like more so democratize who, like, there always has to be checks and balances, right? Like you said, you can't just like allow any module to come in if it hasn't been like, let's say, audited, if it's like we're not 100% sure, like if there's, you have to be like incredibly technical and educated in the topic to fully be able to understand if something is in fact safe, and that's a very difficult thing. And so it's going back to the challenge of like DAO governance. Like you need to have people like that in place, like lifeguards that can help like assess those things, that can determine, okay, so how are we going to vet these protocols? Like what is the process? But then also at the same time, how do we get community buy-in as well? Like even if someone is like less educated about the topic, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have a say in the direction of where that's going to go. So I guess it just
Absolutely.
all comes back down to like how are we going to modify or just like upgrade like DAO governance for Lido and to get more people
Mhm.
participating while also keeping those checks and balances and making sure we don't just like let anything like go on mainnet and just like destroy everything, right? So you got to be careful.
Absolutely. So this is, I mean, this isn't a conversation unique to Lido. What about L2s? L2s are controlled by multi-sigs, and no one's saying like an L2 is the worst thing that's ever happened to Ethereum because it exists. Like, no, people say in future, we hope that it's not controlled that way, and the plan is for it not to be. And the same could be said about Lido, but the nuance is lost. So um
That's true. It's
with
definitely like we have so many protocols on mainnet that have, very few people that are in charge of like taking care of them and making sure that they're safe. And you're right, like the L2s and just like a lot of like active like proof mechanisms aren't in place yet in order to be able to protect the funds that get, shipped up to the different layer. But in the future, there will be, proof verification systems and like force exit mechanisms, and that's super important.
Yeah,
But a lot of
love it.
sometimes when you want to ship a product, right? Like you have to think about like the business side of things. Like if I don't ship this, like will I get buy-in? Will I be able to sustain this? And so there's like all that the it's the progressive decentralization thing. Like it's really easy to be like, no, it needs to be decentralized from the beginning. And like I feel like my view used to be like that. When I first entered crypto, it's just like I had no tolerance for something that was like centralized to begin with. But like over time, I realized that like it's just decentralization is hard, right? So you have to take measured steps to get there. And I think it's reasonable, but it's not
Absolutely.
perfect from the first day.
It takes time, and that is just not, not saying that therefore this is the perfect state, but it's just giving some context. So like people view Lido as something that was either like designed to be as big and as evil as possible from the start, when actually it's
Mhm.
much more likely, as the reality tends to be, is that it just was a protocol that was like, this is better than centralized exchanges, and grew bigger than it expected to. If it was
Mhm.
stuck at 20, if it was at 20% and Coinbase or another centralized exchange was at 40%, would people be actually be saying, oh, why aren't people staking with Lido? Like, please stake with Lido, for example, like in a different world, right? It's actually just to do with a few percentages that matter. So um, we can just touch on briefly then some future
Okay.
options. So for example, ossification. So what if the contracts get deployed? So Lido DAO governance only matters if it can do something. So if you had
Mhm.
ossified contracts and there was no upgradability and they were fixed forever, then you wouldn't have to worry. It would just work. Now, that doesn't work in the same way like L2s right now. Why don't they just throw away the keys and just say it's perfect? Well, because they're not ready. Because you need to be able to upgrade protocols and to make changes. And um, if something did go wrong, there are lots of things in place, like fail safes and things to stop funds being drained and all of that. So having some manual stop processes. Now, in addition to that, if we can't go to ossification, that would be like the gold standard, right? Ossification,
Mhm.
don't worry about it. Now, or still worry about it, because then if there's a bug, you're screwed. But
Yep.
the dual governance. So this is something that's being worked on right now and looked at, is staked ETH dual governance. And what that means is that even though the Lido DAO might have a huge amount of power potentially to vote on changes to the protocol, the token holders who actually hold the staked ETH should have the option to say no. So this is the idea that if there was a malicious DAO governance vote, or not even malicious, just not in the best interest of the people that actually hold the tokens, then they would be able to veto the update. And that would mean that the token holders, the staked ETH holders, people actually being validators, would be able to say no. And then in theory, if they really hated it, they should withdraw their validators and withdraw their ETH. So Lido shrinks because of that. So there's
Mhm.
that is something that is being actively considered, this dual governance. But the reason why is to actually, as everyone's saying, like, oh well, this centralized control. It's like, yeah, well, what solutions are there? Let's move towards that, and that's what's being actively discussed and developed right now. And if people have comments and views on that, then go onto the Lido forums and discuss it, because they're really interested to hear your thoughts and actually care about getting it right, because the goal is not to become more centralized. It's not to like be like, yeah, let's get rid of that multi-sig and I'll just have one EOA just on my ledger and that'll control every, like, that's not the goal. The goal is to move away
Mhm.
from it. And people are saying, well, it's not moving fast enough, as you just said, and that's fine. You're never going to make everybody happy, but it is nice to know that the direction is moving towards decentralization, just not as fast as people would like. But that's true of anything.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable, like that dual token idea. I hadn't heard about it before, so again, thank you for catching me up. I think that that makes a lot of sense. So it gives people the power to block things, like should it really be a problem? But I think there's also the consideration of making sure that people have a say in making the decisions beforehand, like before it gets to that point. So I think like just having again that two-way communication street and like letting people feel comfortable and knowing that if they were to propose something, it wouldn't just like automatically get rejected at a level at which they cannot control. I think that's also an important consideration. And then in terms of ossification, right? Like you said, it's like sure that's the gold standard, but at the same time, is it the gold standard though? Like these technologies are so new, and like as if you look back like 10 years ago, imagine there was some kind of technology like not even necessarily blockchain related, right? And like it just somehow was ossified, and then like all the different things that could like you kind of lose out on innovation over time. And so
Yes.
like
So
I'm I
to
think
clarify
that
that about ossification, my view on it in my head is with Uniswap. So Uniswap have new
mhm,
versions that come out,
yeah,
but and they're
it's
so like
true.
Uniswap V2 is ossified. It cannot be changed. But then they rolled out V3, and then you can choose to move to V3 if you'd like to. And now that has issues with like liquidity and Ethereum necessarily like the way validators work. It's difficult to like withdraw and then move to the new protocol in that design. But it's more about like it's choice ossification, where you say like I've making this choice and it cannot change, and only if I choose to change will I migrate to the
Mhm,
next one. That's like the whole social consensus thing of like Ethereum itself, right? If you choose to run a validator with this client and someone says let's hard fork this, let's make this change, you can say no, and that's the choice ossification is more than the actual like code itself.
that's a good point. Yeah, that's definitely a good point. I guess like then my other main concern is just like you said, like if there is some kind of bug in production and all like the different safety mechanisms that like go into potentially protecting what could go wrong are just, it just doesn't work. So
Yeah,
I think there's a trade-off there, right? About making new versions versus like making a protocol like upgradable within, but then again, you always get back to the same problem. Like who
yeah,
who is in charge of making those decisions? Like are we comfortable with a small group of people like effectively watching over that? And then is that centralized? Is that actually okay? But that should ultimately be
yeah,
up to the community to decide. But then again,
yeah,
back to the same kind of
yeah.
topic over and over again.
Don't think we can answer those questions here. But
Nobody
it's good
solved
to
it yet.
know. It's good to know that is what people are thinking about, and it's great to have had this entire conversation around like your background and from a very different point of view from other people that I've spoken to about this. And to be clear, it's not about being super pro Lido. It's actually about being super pro Ethereum and understanding again,
Yeah,
Lido does exist. So unless people are going to fork it out of the hard fork Lido out, it will exist. So we need to work out how we can improve protocol. And my goal, I've been saying, it's not to make Lido bigger, it's just to make Lido better.
I like that.
So that's the plan.
We
All
should
right,
all
well, thank
strive to make everything better all the time.
that's the plan. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation. I appreciate you taking the time. And yeah, hopefully if we talk again, maybe if we spoke again in 6 months time or a year's time, and follow up on some of these comments and see if anything's
Yeah.
changed, that would also be great.
Yeah, I would love that. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Eridian. And really thank you for having me on. And let's definitely do that again in 6 months.
Right, thanks, Steffi. Bye.
Okay. Bye.